So my TED Talk is how perspective affects happiness. You've probably heard this simple question about 1,000,000 times. Is the glass half full or half empty? It is said that someone with a more positive perspective would say half full, and someone with a more negative perspective would say half empty. In this TED Talk, I will be explaining these two different mindsets. My name is Paige Fabbio, and I'm 14 years old, and I'm interested in psychology. Like many other people my age, I tend to be a negative thinker, and at times this prevents me from reaching my full potential and trying new things. Your perspective, the way you perceive and interpret events, can profusely affect your overall happiness and well-being. The difference between a positive and a negative mindset is essentially that someone with a more negative perspective mostly focuses on the bad in a situation, while someone with a more positive perspective will mainly focus on the good. Maintaining a positive perspective can help you relieve stress, raise self-esteem, and avoid depression. Having a negative mindset can affect you in multiple harmful ways. An example of a negative mindset is coming home from school and only focusing on the bad and boring classes you had rather than any of the fun ones. When you think of every situation in a pessimistic way, it can greatly damage your mental health. I'll be explaining the effects of a negative and positive mindset and how to correct your pessimism. Having a positive perspective can lower your stress. When you start convincing yourself that everything that can go wrong will, your stress levels will rise. This is because you're expecting the worst out of a situation and you are stressed about the outcome. A way to fix this is to just simply alter your perspective. It sounds simple, and it really is. When you catch yourself stressing about upcoming events or things you can't control, such as a test, remind yourself that the worst outcome you've come up with in your head is really likely to not happen. While having a positive perspective can lower your stress, it can also help you build self-confidence. Maintaining a positive perspective can help you raise self-esteem. For example, you have a big test next period. Are you the type of person to say, I'm so stupid, I'm going to fail this test? Or are you the type of person to say, I studied all that I could for this test, so whatever I get, I'll be happy with? Think of which person, one or two, has more self-esteem. You would probably agree that person two. If person one continuously thinks like this, they will end up convincing themselves that they're actually stupid, and this is what leads to low self-esteem. This is why it's so important to think positively. Otherwise, you may not be reaching your full potential. A way to fix this is when you catch yourself saying you can't do something, think of someone who supports you. What would they say to you if they heard you degrading yourself? I like a method from an article called The Toxic Effects of Negative Self-Talk by Elizabeth Scott. She says to think like a friend. Think of how you'd share your thoughts with a good friend or how you'd like a good friend to talk to you. Maintaining a positive perspective can help you avoid depression. Having a positive outlook helps you prevent getting depression or depression-related symptoms. When you harp over negative thoughts, you start to believe that they are the reality of the situation, and this creates a sense of apathy and helplessness. A way to prevent negative thinking, which can lead to depression, is to stop and ask yourself if what you're thinking is the reality of the situation. So think of if what you're saying is actually true. For example, you have tryouts for a sport this weekend, and you tell yourself, I'm going to fail, everyone is better than me, I'm just so bad at soccer, I'm so bad at swimming, or whatever. Just remind yourself that the reality of it is that I'm sure not everyone is better than you. Although there may be a few people who are actually better than you, I'm sure you'll be right there in the middle, maybe you'll even be better than a lot of people. So you just have to give 100% of the tryout, and your result is your result. And with depression on the rise, it is especially important to have a positive mindset. Starting today, try to change your perspective and overall well-being. Remember that according to Jasper Bergink, who wrote an article called Happiness, It's Not Just Your Genes, Stupid, says that 50% of happiness is determined by your genes, 10% of happiness is determined by the circumstances in which you live, and 40% of happiness is determined by your actions, your optimism and attitude, and the way you handle situations. This proves that you do have a good amount of control over your own happiness. I tend to be a negative thinker. I don't like to try new things because I worry over the worst outcomes of every situation. I'm beginning to realize that the worst fear I've come up with never happens, or almost never happens. Everyone wants to live a happy and fulfilled life. Negativity may be the only thing that's keeping you from that. Every day, if you wish to improve your mindset, follow my advice. When caught thinking negatively about yourself, ask yourself, is what you're saying actually true? Remind yourself that the worst possible outcome is likely to not happen. And also, make sure to ask yourself if you're thinking of the reality of the situation and think of someone who supports you. And this is a quote I really like: a positive mind towards everything will give you a happier life. Thank you.